Isaac Thorne stood before the judge, a man who believed the world was just a command. But Thorne wasn't there to beg for mercy. He was there to collect a debt. And the man in the black robe, Alastair Finch, had no idea his time was already up. This wasn't a trial. It was a final act of a long-running play, and Thorne was here to burn the stage to the ground. It began at sunrise. Isaac's car sat like a predator across from the old police station, a building that was part of the town's cruel history. Forest, Alabama hadn't changed. It was still a place that used its southern charm to hide its fangs, and it was still careful about who it allowed to feel comfortable. Isaac wasn't there for comfort. He was a ghost, a deep-cover FBI operative, and for weeks he had been meticulously mapping the town's arteries. Patrol rotations, money transfers, the subtle ticks of men who thought they were invisible. On paper, Isaac Thorne was a nobody. In reality, he was a former Marine raider, a man honed into a weapon. The target, a local cop, emerged from a diner. Isaac logged the time and saw the subtle hand signal to a man across the street. It was a silent conversation, too clean, too rehearsed. The scent of a setup was unmistakable. Then a cruiser appeared, not with lights or sirens, but with pure, cold intent. Two white officers exited, one to block his car, the other swaggering toward his window. Isaac, his hands calm on the wheel, lowered the glass halfway. The officer didn't ask a question. He just tapped the window with his baton and barked, "License and registration." "You don't want to do this," Isaac warned, his voice low and steady. It was an offer, a chance for them to step back from the edge. They didn't take it. The rear door was ripped open, and he was hauled out and slammed face down on the hood of his own car before a single word of arrest was spoken. Then came the rehearsed shout, "Officer down." Despite not a single hand being raised against them, the cuffs clicked shut. No struggle, no resistance, just force followed by a lie. Across the street, Mrs. Patterson gripped her grocery bag. She had seen this scene her whole life. Black skin meeting steel and concrete, while uniforms screamed danger. But this time, it felt different. A few feet away, Jenna Reed, a young journalist from Charlotte, had her phone out, recording on pure instinct. The man they were arresting hadn't fought. He hadn't even flinched. He just watched them, his eyes cold and knowing, as if he knew exactly how far they would go and was letting them. They charged him with assaulting an officer and resisting arrest. Jenna's footage told a different story. No raised hand, no word after that first calm warning. Still, they dragged him away like a caged animal. At the station, his story didn't add up. No priors, no warrants. The name Isaac Thorne triggered a dozen silent federal alarms. His file sealed tighter than a tomb, the kind of seal that made local cops sweat. They booked him anyway, calling it procedure. Isaac said nothing, just sat in the holding cell, his back straight, his eyes sharp. A man who had never learned how to bow. A young deputy named Frank Cole watched him from behind the glass. He later whispered to a colleague, "That man isn't scared. He's waiting." And he was. Isaac Thorne let them take him because the only way to get a corrupt system is to let it swallow you whole and rot it from the inside. That rot was now sitting in a courtroom, wearing a black robe and calling itself justice. This wasn't a mistake. It was a mission. Judge Alastair Finch had no idea the man he was about to humiliate had come to burn his world to the ground. They brought Isaac into the courtroom in cuffs, a theatrical display designed to send message. A hush fell over the room. His presence was not loud, but it consumed the air. Chained and in plain clothes, he somehow looked like the only one in control. Judge Finch, his fingers drumming a restless rhythm, began. "Mr. Thorne, let's not waste time. Do you have a lawyer, or are you planning on putting on a show for us?" Claire Bishop, the public defender, stood up, looking rushed but determined. "Your Honor, I've been assigned to Mr. Thorne's case. We've only spoken for a moment." Finch cut her off. "A moment? Does your client grasp how serious this is? Assaulting an officer isn't a traffic violation." Isaac remained silent, his eyes locked on the judge. Claire turned to him, her voice a tense whisper. "Isaac, this is your moment. If you enter a plea, I can try to—" "I'm not pleading guilty," Isaac said, his voice calm, his gaze unwavering. "Not today. Not ever." Finch's eyebrows shot up. Ah, so it speaks. A dry, grating laugh escaped his lips. Well then, he said, leaning forward with a sneer, tell us, Mr. Thorne, what exactly was a man like you doing casing a police station? Claire stiffened. Objection. That assumes facts not in evidence. Sustained, Finch muttered, annoyed. For now. He turned his gaze back to Isaac. I see here you were a Marine. A raider, no less. They teach you to be a hero over there, just so you can come back here and act like a common criminal. He leaned back, a cruel smile on his lips. Why aren't you defending yourself? Cat got your tongue? Or is this where the silent martyr act begins? Still nothing. Just Isaac standing there, his jaw set, his gaze unwavering. His silence was a weapon. In the gallery, Jenna Reed scribbled furiously in her notepad. She leaned toward Mrs. Patterson, whispering, Why won't he say anything? He's letting him walk all over him. That ain't silence, child, Mrs. Patterson replied, her eyes fixed on Isaac. That's strategy. On the bench, Finch was losing control. You're not special, Mr. Thorne. You don't intimidate this court. You're just another angry man who thinks his service record buys him a free pass. Isaac finally moved, tilting his head just enough to meet the judge's eyes. You think this is about a pass? His voice was low, firm, and final. The courtroom froze. Finch's smug mask cracked, a flicker of genuine unease crossing his face. Claire Bishop blinked, stunned. Jenna stopped writing. Mrs. Patterson nodded once. Slowly, desperate to regain control, Finch snapped, Bail is denied. Hearing is set for Friday. Court adjourned. His gavel struck the wood with a crack. It was a retreat, not a ruling, as the guards led Isaac away. He walked like a man whose mission could not be interrupted by steel bars. Jenna whispered, He's not just fighting this. He came to win. Beside her, Mrs. Patterson's voice was low and certain. No, child, he came to end it. What the courtroom didn't know, what Judge Finch would learn too late, was that Isaac Thorne wasn't a defendant. He was a reckoning. The next day, the tension in the courtroom was a living thing. Isaac walked in without cuffs, flanked by two guards who watched him like an unpredictable storm. Judge Finch was already on the bench, his jaw tight. Isaac's unreadable silence from the day before had clearly gotten under his skin. Bring the defendant forward, Finch ordered, his voice flat. Isaac moved into position, calm and centered. Finch's voice rose, desperate to regain control. Mr. Thorne, you seem to think your silence is a weapon. Let me be clear. It just makes you look guilty. In my courtroom, you are nothing. Not a soldier, not a hero, just another number on my docket who will leave here stripped of any fantasy you're clinging to. Isaac didn't move. His silence wasn't empty. It was active. It pressed into the judge's words, making them hollow. Finch's lip curled into a snarl. You think you're untouchable? He barked, the mask of impartiality gone. You're just another thug in a uniform. You wear that honor like it's a shield, but it won't protect you in here. Not for me. The room went rigid. The bailiff shifted his weight. Jenna's pen froze. Isaac didn't flinch. He simply lifted his head and met the judge's hateful gaze. The look wasn't rage or fear. It was absolute control. It was a look that said, I see you. I know what you are, and I am not the one who is afraid. The blood drained from Finch's face. He fumbled with the papers on his desk, as if they could shield him from the weight of that stare. The courtroom held its breath. Near the jury box, Deputy Frank Cole leaned forward, an Army Ranger himself. He recognized the stance of an operator. Then he caught the thin surgical scar on Isaac's wrist. He'd seen one just like it in a med tent overseas. He sat back slowly, a cold knot in his stomach. Everything he thought he knew was wrong. In the gallery, Jenna was shaken. This wasn't law, it was venom. She pulled out her tablet and ran Isaac's name through a series of backdoor searches. Finally, a red box flashed on her screen. Access denied. Counterintelligence flag. Lethal force authorized. Jenna's heart pounded. Who the hell was this man? Up front, Judge Finch was rambling, hiding behind legal jargon, but no one was listening. Isaac Thorne had taken control of the room without saying a word. His silence was louder than the gavel, louder than the hate. It was the beginning of Finch's unraveling. Later, in the dim quiet of the holding cell, Deputy Cole stood outside the bars. "You one of them?" he whispered. "The Raiders?" Isaac, sitting on the bench, gave a barely perceptible nod. That was enough. Cole asked no more. That night, Jenna sat in a diner, her laptop glowing. She'd found him. A grainy photo from an old DOD newsletter. 5 Marine Raiders in front of a shattered wall. 4 were named. The 5th, taller and standing apart, had no caption. It was him. Same eyes, same silence. In his cell, Isaac pulled out a small black notebook. They never checked for it. They thought the danger was in a man's hands, not his mind. He wrote, "Silence is not surrender. It's timing." He remembered a dusty rooftop, his team pinned down. He'd held up a finger. Wait, they waited. They lived. But he'd stay behind, giving himself up so they could escape. What followed was 3 days of darkness, and pain meant to shatter his soul. He had stayed silent then, too. The mission was bigger than his name. This courtroom wasn't about a bogus charge. It was about watching the rot spread until you knew exactly where to cut. And that moment was getting close. Judge Alastair Finch had crossed a line from law to vengeance years ago. His son, Kevin, had been killed in a bar fight. The man who pulled the trigger, a black ex-soldier, claimed self-defense and walked on a technicality. In that moment, something inside Finch broke. He never spoke of it, but the poison began to work. He started handing down harsher sentences to black defendants, especially veterans. It wasn't justice anymore. It was revenge served from behind the sealed court. Judge Finch had an ally, Sheriff Gene Miller, a man who knew where all the bodies were buried because he'd helped dig the holes. Miller brought Finch fabricated cases, arrests built on shaky testimony while body cam footage vanished, and Finch made them stick. Together, they built a quiet kingdom of fear, but they were not invisible. Jenna Reed's investigation uncovered the pattern. 7 black veterans, all accused of aggression, all facing Finch and Miller. One had filed a complaint, then vanished. Jenna stared at a photo of the 2 men laughing at a fundraiser. This wasn't just corruption. It was a hunt. The pressure was building. At FBI headquarters, a red light blinked on a secure monitor. Isaac Thorne, an analyst, told the director, "Sir, Operation Ironclad is accelerating. He's moving to finish the job." The director's voice was quiet. "He doesn't have clearance to break cover." The analyst's reply was even quieter. "Sir, I don't think he's asking." In Forston, the threats began. A dead-of-night call to Jenna's motel. A text from an unknown number. "Stop digging or disappear like the others." Her hands trembled, but her resolve only hardened. Meanwhile, Deputy Frank Cole, tormented by his conscience, slipped a folded paper into Isaac's cell. It was a list. The names of the men Finch and Miller had erased from the system. When Isaac read it, the final lock clicked into place. He was done waiting. That night, he cornered a talkative guard in an unmonitored room. The tiny wire on Isaac's collar recorded every word as the guard laid out the entire scheme of bribes and buried cases. Isaac now had the map. By morning, the courthouse was a powder keg. Jenna's article, "The Soldier Who Chose Silence," had gone viral. Reporters swarmed the steps. Veterans stood in silent formation. The public was awake. Inside, Judge Finch banged his gavel. "We will proceed, Mr. Thorne," he sneered. "Does a defendant have anything to say before I render judgment?" The courtroom fell silent. Isaac stood tall. For the first time, his eyes swept the room, finally landing on the judge. "I do." His voice was not loud, but it filled every corner with absolute authority. "My name is Special Agent Isaac Thorne, Federal Bureau of Investigation. Badge number 7305. A collective gasp went through the room. Finch's face went white. Sheriff Miller froze by the door. "For the past 6 months," Isaac continued, his voice like ice, "I've been leading Operation Ironclad, a federal investigation into systemic corruption and civil rights violations within this county." He looked directly at the judge. specifically into you, Judge Alastair Finch, and you, Sheriff Gene Miller. Finch shot to his feet. This is contempt. I'll have you. You'll do nothing. Isaac cut him off. He held up the list Cole had given him. Because I have the names of the 12 men you made disappear, and I have a full confession from one of your own guards, recorded on a federal wire. As he spoke, the main courtroom doors swung open. FBI agents in tactical gear stepped inside, their purpose clear. Alastair Finch, Isaac commanded, his voice ringing with finality. You are under arrest for conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and murder. Finch collapsed into his chair, speechless. Miller bolted for a side exit, but was slammed against the wall by 2 agents before he took 3 steps. The lead agent approached the bench and read Finch's rights, while another stripped the black robe from his shoulders. The sound of Miller's handcuffs clicking shut echoed in the stunned silence. An hour later, in a sterile interrogation room, Finch and Miller sat at a steel table. In front of them were 2 documents, full confessions and resignations. You signed these, the U.S. attorney told them, and you might see the sun again one day. You don't, and you will die in a federal prison. With shaking hands, they signed away their power. From behind the one-way glass, Isaac Thorne watched. He didn't smile. He simply observed as the debt was paid in full. Justice hadn't been found. It had been delivered.